Patrick and I are in Sydney again today, this time joined by Dangerous Goods consultant Dan Amor, Director of Work Health Safety Rescue. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey in the DG safety industry and where you are today?
Yeah, sure. WHS Rescue is a work health and safety consultancy that specialises in working for companies who want to outsource their WHS compliance and paperwork. And to go with that, we do site inspection, dangerous goods assessments, and then just ensure their processes and policies and procedures are up to date, meet regulatory requirements, and the PCBU is covered. So the dangerous goods stuff was born of that, essentially. And we go out on site and we do walkarounds and we ensure that gas bottles are stored, petrols and flammables are stored, petrols, chemicals, everything's stored appropriately, environmentally, and we just make sure that we cover them for that. And that's it wasn't part of the business when I bought it, to be honest. So we've just pushed, by necessity, our clients are users of chemicals, users of petrols. We service the agricultural sector. So cotton farmers have a lot of petrol, a lot of diesel, a lot of chemicals, and often they don't mix. So going on site, on farm, and saying we need to move those apart and we need to have them appropriately bundled and stored and make sure the environment's looked after is how we got into DG space.
Yeah, sure. I guess, there would have been a lot of learning involved in that for you, adding that side of the business. Can you tell us about how you went about that and
the transition?
How you found it?
Yeah, well, both textbook and common sense, I think.
Yeah.
It makes sense not to have something stored in direct heat. But when you're a business owner and you've got a lot of moving parts, a lot of people, a lot of things, you often overlook the small things. So, as a consultancy, we're paid to look at the small things and make sure they're covered. So, and then, working with people like yourselves and looking at your documents that are sent out and your product guide gave me a really good sense of what's available, what's appropriate, and who to access it through and things like that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Perfect. Oh, glad you found that helpful.
Cool. So who's your typical client, Dan?
Pretty varied. As I said, we look after agriculture. We also look after a government body, so we've got multiple sites there. Construction sector is also a main client of ours. So they're the three clients: Ag, Department of Education, and construction. So typical in each space is varied. Obviously, the Ag guys are isolated. They work remotely. They've got large volumes. They usually deal with 1,000-litre containers for chemicals, 10,000-litre petrol storage, that kind of thing, right down to our smaller government bodies who might be around 9-kilo gas bottle kind of size.
Yeah.
But they all assess it in different ways because out of necessity, really.
Yeah.
There's no real one or the other, and then you've got certain spaces that have multiple chemicals, or multiple dangerous goods, diesel, unleaded, chemicals, petrols, gas bottles. You've got to look at the whole lot.
Yeah.
And also, because we look after schools, you've got a ton of cleaning products and hand sanitizer, which people don't think about, but it's very much on the radar of ours.
Definitely.
Yeah. In terms of agriculture specifically, I mean, you've touched on the chemicals and the dangerous goods that they have, but what are some of the constraints or specific needs around those types of work sites that you have to consider when thinking about the solutions or engineering controls?
One thing we had to look at really closely first was the environmental part of it, so ensuring there's adequate bunding and catchment areas. So having either something that's concrete and built in or having a movable product or a product you purchase that has an inbuilt bundled system.
Yep.
That's what we have to think about with those guys. And like I said, they deal in bulk. So everything's on farm, everything gets moved around.
Spread out across
big areas. So we need to think about logistics of why they move things around, which we've spoken to you guys about having the mobile storage containers. So that's one thing we have to think about, the ag guys. It's really the volume of it is the main thing.
Their environment is their livelihood as well. Like that prime agricultural land is such an important thing to them. So any spills or anything like that.
Yeah, waterways,
the last thing
the land, the mixture of chemicals with diesel, so they obviously don't mix, some of them. So they all know, they're aware of what needs to be kept separate.
Yep.
It's the next step. And then some of the farmers I work with require additional accreditation from their regulatory body.
Yep.
So they get assessed on that, or they get scrutinised on that. And traditionally, it was only one generation ago where, you know, the owner or the previous parent, which has been handed down, or the previous owner, would just have everything in a shed.
Yep.
These days, you know, we're so safety focused, and rightly so, that there's available and economical ways of keeping these things stored.
Yeah.
Great. And outside of dangerous goods, what other safety spaces, or how else do you support these farmers?
PPE and just basic first aid equipment.
Okay.
First aid boxes, first aid equipment, defibrillators, snake bite kits, that kind of thing.
Is that things that are often easily overlooked as well?
No, they're pretty good actually
Pretty
on having, let's use first aid kits for example. They might have one defibrillator, but because of the nature of their business, they're quite spread out. So, you know, we advise things like having adequate first aid per vehicle, because these days it's commercial. It used to be not quite commercial to put one in every vehicle because you're paying up, you know, $200-300 for a proper kit.
Yep.
These days you can do it pretty cheaply. So we're like, well, why not? You know, you're spending $500,000 on a header.
Yeah.
Why don't you go and spend $500 on 5 first aid kits and put one in each?
Yep.
Makes sense.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, well, what good's the first aid kit if it's on a tractor somewhere kilometres away?
That's right. Yeah. And that's, I mean, they think that they've always made it through, and they're like, oh, I've never thought of buying, you know, one for everywhere. It's like, well, for a couple of grand, when you're spending that kind of money on your enterprise.
Yep.
And I think what we've found with our farmers these days, not to take anything away from previous, they're very much running it like a corporation. So any farm that's not already owned by a large corporation that's, you know, owned by a bank in the city or a superannuation fund or something like that, the next tier down, which is still mum and dad operations, they're running it like a corporation now. They've got roles and responsibilities. They've got standards that they have to live up to. They've got a board of directors who's probably the mum, the dad and the children kind of thing. So they do have certain corporate governance that they've got to stick to.
Yep.
So they're taking it, running their business like a corporation anyway.
Yeah. So I guess part of that, when there's that increased focus on the liability, all those sorts of issues, but also they'll be starting to think more and more about efficiency as well. So efficiency in the solutions that they use and
how it integrates with their equipment.
Yeah, for sure. And I touched on corporate governance. They've got a duty of care to themselves and others. They're well aware of Safe Work, the regulator. They're well aware of their responsibilities there. So as a WHS consultancy business, you know, we insert ourselves into their business and say, look, you need to think about this from a worker level, and you need to think about this from a board level, and make sure that the lines are clearly defined, and make sure that you know your roles and responsibilities, and so do your staff. Then we need to make sure that it all fits into your, you know, corporate governance piece.
Yep.
And that comes in all of that is things like dangerous goods assessment, psychosocial hazards, physical hazards, and you know, there's a whole list of stuff.
Yeah, wow. So what does the majority of your day look like in the role?
It depends if I'm travelling or not. If I'm in Sydney, where we're based, I'll generally travel to a client, be there around 8 o'clock.
Okay.
I would have done a bit of prep work the night before on documentation. Probably about a 4-hour visit, which is like an annual review service. This is like an annual review kind of day.
Great.
Spend 4 hours on site, doing another walk around their site, looking at their hazards, looking at their dangerous goods, talking about their induction processes, seeing if there's any gaps we need to cover that might have happened in the time since I was there last year. So we try and do an annual review with some clients, and other clients say, no, we want you to come back every quarter. We want you to be more interactive. I might do a presentation to staff on something that's topical in the sector at the moment. At the moment, psychosocial is very big.
Yeah.
A year ago, it was dangerous goods, that kind of thing. That's
Staying relevant
and making part of the training and part of their day or part of their their work life, that they know about WHS and they know that they've all got a role to play.
Yep.
And it's not just these 3 letters that everyone kind of look at the ground when they hear them,
Yeah.
which is historically what happens when you go, let's talk about WHS, and everyone goes, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
But, we're trying to insert a practical common sense approach to this because it's pretty dry content. However, it's extremely important, and you can create a culture of safety, which is ultimately what we're trying to do.
The proactivity.
By being proactive and providing proper support.
Unfortunately, in this sort of field, incidents do happen, and sometimes people end up coming to people like yourself in response to an incident that's happened. Can you give any examples of incidents relating to dangerous goods that you're aware of that can be avoided?
Yeah, dangerous goods not so much because they're pretty avoidable and everyone knows the risks.
The ramifications.
The ramifications, yeah. We've dealt with snake bites.
Yep.
We've dealt with, probably the closer we got to dangerous goods is some kind of crushed toe incident.
Yeah.
Rolled cars into waterways is another thing we've had conversations about.
Yep.
Self-harm notes left for management and staff.
Yep.
The dangerous goods piece, nothing specific.
Yeah.
Right.
I think if anything, I've seen it happen, but it hasn't been escalated to me, is eye injuries through splashing and things like that. And that's probably through mishandling or trying to lift something that's too heavy or slip, because chemicals can get pretty slippery when you touch them.
Yeah.
So we have policies around heavy lifting. We have policies around PPE and wearing the right equipment, that kind of thing. So I have seen chemical splash, and then you got the eye wash stations and things like that, and they can be pretty rudimentary, like down to a hose kind of thing to spray in the eye. But as long as they're effective,
You can get transportable ones.
Yeah, yes. Signage is one thing where you ram home. So look, you've got to have people need to know where to go to use a chemical shower or an eye wash station. It needs to be
Especially
advertised.
if the visibility is not great in the area.
Yeah. And then you got the obstruction issue through that as well, because people leave stuff in the eye wash station, like equipment or mop buckets or things like that. And you're like, well, how is someone meant to get in there if they have a situation? So we just do the reminding of things like that.
Yeah.
And people are really good. I think at some point, not too distant past, they would have rolled our eyes at us making those suggestions, but now they're very serious. They're like, no, we have the well-being of our staff at the fore. And so they should, because there's plenty of evidence that proves that if you've got a good staff cohort who are healthy and happy and have a good well-being, their output's better.
Yeah, performance increases.
If they feel like they're cared for as well.
Yeah.
So what are some of the most common mistakes organisations make with their WHS?
Incompleteness is probably the main one. I would say is what we see the most when we get invited on site to either do an audit of someone's WHS system or get invited to work on their WHS system with them. And that predominantly comes from the fact that they know how important it is and they know that it needs to be done. However, the person who's tasked with doing it in-house has 3 or 4 other jobs. It's not their area of expertise. And when they get around to putting that 3rd or 4th hat on to do WHS and they get an interruption, they tend to take the interruption every day of the week because WHS is pretty dry.
Yep.
Particularly if you're not doing it all the time. There's not a whole lot of black and white when it comes to this is what you must do when it comes to WHS. There's a ton of guidelines.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a newbie looking at it, you go, "What is this? What I have to do, or is this just a guideline?"
Yeah.
So when you've got someone who says, "Look, I know what the standards are, I know what the regulations are, I know what will cover you, I know what makes sense from a common sense point of view and from a practical point of view," then you can say, "Let's now take that framework and go into your business and customise your needs to what the regulator wants to see." And then you're covered from a regulatory point of view.
Yep.
And then we look at the common sense practical aspects from keeping people safe, actually safe on their site.
Yeah, great. That's the very similar approach that we try to take with our dangerous goods kind of risk management approach in the way we develop products and give advice around storage as well.
Yeah.
I think you guys are really good at it. You've got to look at your client. I mean, I don't run a business like yours, but you need to look at all of your cross-section of clients and go, what what's the most commercial thing for me to build that's going to keep everyone happy?
Similar theme.
Yeah.
Yeah. What challenges they're facing at that point
Yeah,
in
because
time.
if you're doing bespoke stuff, you'll go out of business tomorrow.
Yeah.
So you need to get in the hip pocket of your client and go, okay, what do you need? And how can I relate, client A to client B and make sure I can build something that satisfies both of their needs, but I can just go and produce one of them or 10,000 of them.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We look at the whole WHS law or act and say, okay, well, a school or a farm or a construction company, they have to adhere to the same guidelines per se, but they're going to have to look at them from different angles.
Yeah.
For example, drug and alcohol in the workplace, or working at heights, or confined spaces, or psychosocial issues around bullying. They all are relatable, but you've got to focus as per your client.
Have you seen many changes in the way that this stuff's regulated in your time in this industry?
Yes. Mainly in June of this year, the New South Wales Parliament changed the Safe Work WHS Act of 2011, New South Wales, to pass the Manslaughter Bill. Okay. So now you can be found, or PCBU can be found liable under the Manslaughter Act and go to jail if gross negligence is found as part of the incident that happened. So, yeah, there's always changes. Yep. There's big changes like that, and then there's also focuses. Like I said, there's dangerous goods or psychosocial, asbestos. You name it. There's always something popping up.
Something's evolving, new research, new studies being done,
and that's good. And I think SafeWork do a really good job of publicising what they're focusing on, and therefore what we need to focus on, because you don't want to get in a situation where you're not focusing on something that's really important. And something happens, and then SafeWork go, well, we need you to focus on this, and then, well, I didn't know, but they do a really good job of getting it out there, through LinkedIn,
raising the awareness,
social media. If you just follow their sites, it pops up.
Get all the updates.
Yeah, and it's really helpful, and then you can drill down on whatever you want.
Yep, I guess that's another thing that's changed. The more ease of access, and you can tap into a direct line for updates now a lot easier than you would have been able to do
newsletter
10 years ago.
Yeah. There is overkill though.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're getting
drowned in it.
Stuff everywhere. Yeah.
Overload of information.
Yeah.
Where do your clients go to for information generally? Do you find?
So the farmers have New South Farmers Federation. They've got they read the land. They're all prolific readers. I think with the construction companies, they've got bodies like union bodies, Master Builders Association. They've usually got on-site safety officers who are tasked with that job because it's such an important role. Yeah. So I think now across the board, they sort of pick up from their individual organisation or body, and then they rely on people like us to be up to date. And we do sort of push that as this isn't your main game. Your main game is growing cotton, or their main game is building buildings. So we push a theme of saying, look, we will step into this space for you, work with you on this, outsource it to us. We'll integrate ourselves into your business, and you can just get on with your main game.
Yeah, it's good to be able to focus on what you need to do best and not have to be distracted by something that also requires a lot of focus. But
importance.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a ton of focus on it, It's not going away.
No.
And it's important. Everyone deserves. I think SafeWork has a quote on their website that say everyone deserves to go home each day in the same way everyone deserves to leave work each day in the same way they left home.
Yep.
Something
that
like
rings
that.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. So they've got a huge focus on it.
So what geographical area do you cover, Dan, and what's the services look like that you can provide?
New South Wales.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
We're based in Sydney. We're a relatively small business by design because we specialise in working with companies one-on-one. So we pick our clients, but that takes us anywhere and everywhere. So probably as far southwest as Deniliquin on the Riverina. We go out past Dubbo in the northwest, in the central west, that's called, up as far as the Queensland border, Lismore, everywhere in between. So a day trip for me is Wollongong and back, which is an hour or so. Yeah, we go through the Hunter Valley, so all over New South Wales.
That's great.
And the ACT.
Yeah, good. And I mean, I guess they'd appreciate you being on site as well. It's a different type of service.
Yeah, it's a relationship game, I think. I'm selling my service in me as much as I'm selling my product.
Yep.
They want to know that they've got support.
They can trust you.
Yeah, and they can trust us, and they know that we've got a product that they can use, and someone they can ring up and ask questions if they have any issues. Yep. So we're selling a service in ourselves as much as we are the product.
Peace of mind.
We're very purposeful about that.
Yep.
Because that's what I would want.
Yeah.
Yep. And say someone's starting a new business or someone's just stepped into a new role as a WHS officer for an organisation. Do you have any tips of the first things that they should do when they start thinking about the WHS side of their enterprise?
Absolutely. Ask to see any existing documentation.
Yep.
Okay.
So any safety management system, any process, policy or procedure, which would be a WHS safety management system, any kind of safe work method statements, any old meeting minutes or any old safety walkarounds or anything like that, and then start with that and go through it, and you'll quickly find where the organisation is inadequate, where they perform well, and then you can build on it from there, and you can start plugging what goes where as far as in the org chart.
Yep.
I would start with that.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it means a lot of reading.
Yeah.
And probably getting given a terabyte worth of data that you've got to go through yourself. But you need to know what you're dealing with, because you don't want to start from scratch if you've already got a decent framework. And you might have to start from scratch if you've got nothing.
Yep.
I guess a few important pieces of documentation would be safety manuals, maybe SDS sheets. Is there anything else that would...
Safety manuals for sure, just evidence of that. Safety data sheets, absolutely. Walk around the site if it is a site-based job. Look for signage, posters, any evidence of actual hazards. Is it a messy work site? Are there no railings? Is there no yellow paint on slip, trips and falls? Just look for evidence of something that might have happened in the past. Did the previous safety officer have that job as their third hat and they did nothing with it?
Yep.
Or were they specific for it? Because specific to their role. Because you are then on the hook. If you're taking on this role, you've got this responsibility, you want to make sure it's done right.
Yep.
And you want to make sure the processes are there. And then my other bit of advice would be, don't be afraid to document it and say, these are the changes we are going to make, and we need to make these to make my role easier, to make sure that when I'm accountable for what's going on, and then say, by the way, I'm not the PCBU in this business, you are. So if we don't implement this and make the process adequate, then you've got a problem too.
Yep. And if you're unsure about anything at all, seek expert advice.
That's right, yeah, and that's where we get brought into businesses who have safety management systems in place and safety officers, and get asked to do an audit of what it looks like and if it isn't adequate. That we do that as part of our role, and we've walked away and said, no, everything's fine. It's all it all works well. Maybe tweak that and change that. And we've got others that go, you've got huge gaps here and massive gaps there. You need to rethink that.
Sure.
And how do your clients integrate that into the regular processes, daily, yearly, monthly?
Well, they need to consult with their staff. They need to do inductions. They need to new staff inductions, contractor inductions. That all needs to be part of their day-to-day.
Yeah.
It's a non-negotiable in my view. There's no point having a fantastic processes and policies in place when no one knows about them.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we integrate that by making suggestions and referring different parts of their business or integrating new things.
That's
so,
good.
it's not hard when it's made aware to you or if you know about it, and you need to overlay a common sense approach to this. Otherwise, like I said, there's guidelines and you run around trying to do every guideline.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you got yourself in a knot and you're like, I'm going to do this later.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the background and, I guess, evolution of WHS Rescue?
Sure. So WHS Rescue started in 2009. Husband and wife team. the guy that I bought it from, Steve, he was a school principal and was doing WHS at his school. And when he hit retirement age, he decided to start a little consultancy so he could work a few days a week. That was 2009, and then I bought the business just after COVID in February 2022. So we're coming up to 3 years. And he had a great business that had a good client list, good processes. However, when I took the business over, I'd come from a corporate background and had never owned my own business. So I went through the whole corporate governance and having a director who I'm the director of the business, staff member who's my wife, and had to get to know that. So I'd gone from essentially being in corporate and having a lot of support and framework around me through that into a one-man show, and having to understand that. So if I was doing that in a business that was outside of WHS in itself, I would be looking at WHS as one of those things that I would have on my radar as a new business owner or starter, just like I would with policies around drug and alcohol or working alone or that kind of thing. It would be one of on my list of things to make sure I address as a business owner.
Yeah.
How would I do that? Look, you can start anywhere really. The SafeWork is the obvious place to start. They've got a fantastic set of resources on their website. However, it's a rabbit hole. It goes on and on and on. So eventually you probably want to ask someone for some support.
Yep.
And I think that's what you do in business. You fill the gaps of your areas where you're not, you don't have your strengths. Yeah.
Yep.
Where do you see things heading in the next few years?
For the industry or WHS Rescue?
Both, either.
Both, okay. I'll answer the industry first.
Sure.
It is vastly becoming apparent that psychosocial injuries are being treated equally to physical injuries.
Wow.
So I see that becoming a much more focus, and that's born of COVID. It's born from working in homes where people that have cost of living pressures, you name it. So psychosocial issues are something we're taking a huge focus on. Mm-hmm. And the way we're doing that is we're looking at it from two perspectives. One, the legal requirement from the PCBUs to ensure that they are covered in their documents, to have a clear process around monitoring, assessing and offering controls and management around stress, anxiety, anything like that. And we're also, through my wife's business, who's a meditation teacher, introducing stress management courses and consulting, teach-ins and things like that. So
important. That's
definitely what's happening in the industry. And I guess with WHS Rescue, we're bringing my wife's wellbeing coaching business closer to ours. Out of necessity, it was never going to be...
Wow, that's exciting.
Never going to be... It wasn't on the cards.
Yeah.
But because of what we've seen in the last 18 months and where the industry is going, we think we can combine the WHS Rescue compliance piece with her actual wellbeing piece into a really good offering, and that's what we're working on at the moment.
Wow.
Meet a need. Yeah, that's massive.
That's amazing that it kind of has fallen into place like that, really.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a possibility when we bought the business. Have a husband and wife team working together. It was always like, should we do this? Shouldn't we do this? But now we've had, through conversations with our clients, they're saying, we don't know how to handle this. We don't want to be viewed by our staff as doing tokenistic things anymore.
Yep.
We don't, cupcake days don't cut it. We really need to have some strong tools in place.
For them.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's definitely a demand for it. It's how we implement it is what we're working on at the moment.
That's awesome.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you very much for being on the podcast, Dan. Is there any final comments or suggestions you have for our subscribers, perhaps to, revamp their safety and their chemical safety in particular?
Thanks for having me. It's been great. Look, I think your subscribers need to keep looking at innovations in the industry. I think is really important. You guys have brought out a new gas bottle storage range, which is good, because I know that cost is a big thing these days in business. So having what you've done with adjustable shelving and things like that, so they can adjust to have different size containers or gas bottles or flammable goods in the one unit is really helpful. So I think they just need to make sure that they know what's available to them and just get on subscription lists. You don't have to read it from top to bottom every time, but I think companies like yours do a really good job of explaining what's in a newsletter or in an email in the subject field or the first line or two. So, I'd say that they just need to open the mails and have a quick glance, and then if it doesn't, it's not appropriate for them, just hit delete and move on. But they might find something that they can really relate to and they're thinking about.
Yeah,
Awesome.
great advice.
And where can our subscribers reach you, Dan, if they're after some additional support?
WHSrescue.com.au. Yeah, just go straight to the website. We've got a new website.
Nice.
And where all the details are on there.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, thanks very much, Dan.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Dan.
Talk to you soon.
Nice.